You're listening to STEMxm, where women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics share their stories of success, overcoming barriers, and breaking the glass ceiling. And now, your host, Mel the Engineer.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today for episode 10 of the STEMxm podcast. I am your host, Mel the Engineer. On this episode, we have Patricia Valoy. She is a Latina activist, blogger, engineer, and project manager. She promotes STEM education for women and underrepresented minorities. Patricia uses her experiences as a Latina and woman in engineering to advocate for and inspire girls and minorities considering careers in the field of STEM. She earned a BS in civil engineering from Columbia University in 2008. And you may have seen some of her stuff before. She's given a lot of talks and been interviewed several different times. My favorite piece that she was featured in is called "This Latina Owns Her Feminism One Mansplainer at a Time." That was in the Washington Post, and I'll put a link for that in the show notes for you. Okay, so we're going to jump right into the interview with Patty now, and I'll be back with you at the end to discuss resources and the show notes. Here we go. Hello, Patty, and welcome to STEMxm. It's so great to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, it's our pleasure. So you are a civil engineer, but you work in transportation. Can you talk to us about how you got into this field? What was your decision-making process when you were in college?
I don't really remember exactly how I ended up with civil engineering because I originally started with mechanical engineering. And it was mostly because, I grew up not really knowing what engineering was and learning about it very soon before I was applying to colleges and just thinking, oh, okay, well, this looks like a discipline where I can put in all of my likes, my dislikes, and my talents. And I went for it, kind of not knowing what I was going into. As I was studying mechanical engineering, I didn't like it. And I really wanted to, drop out of engineering school, really. And I took a class that was an intro to civil engineering. And I liked it a lot more because it had to do with things that I see every single day. So we were talking about buildings and tunnels and bridges and highways. And I said, okay, I can see that. I understand that. And to somebody like myself who grew up underprivileged, poor, from a ghetto in Brooklyn, not really understanding a lot of what engineering meant, I could find a connection there. And it captured me. I changed my major. I went into civil engineering. Then I went into construction management within civil engineering. And that to me was even better. I really understood it. I like to talk to people. I like to see projects to fruition. And that's where I am now. I'm still involved in both the engineering side and the construction management side, which is what I really, really love to do.
So talk to us about your background a little bit. You mentioned that you didn't really know much about engineering before. So what did your family members do?
My mom was very supportive all the time. I think she always wanted to see me succeed, and she didn't really understand what engineering was either. I don't think she understood what just going to college and living away from home really understood for her, because we were immigrants, and in the Dominican Republic, where I was born and where I'm from, things are just a little bit different. So she took a gamble with me. My dad wanted to be supportive, but he was very uncomfortable. I think he's over it now, but he was very uncomfortable because the way that he saw engineering was, this is a male-dominated field, and this is my daughter going to be in a field where there's only men. So he was definitely uncomfortable with it. I was pretty stubborn, so I stuck with it, and I'm glad I did, but it was a lot of speed bumps along the way. And I think had my family understood and ways to help me and help me out more, it would have been a smoother path, but it's the path I needed to take, and it's where I am. And, at least I can help other people kind of navigate what it means to go into engineering school without really understanding almost what you're getting into. All I had was grades, which it's one thing and it's great. And it's what gets people into college, but there's always so much more to that. And I learned it the tough way. And, I do a lot of mentoring to make sure that other people don't have it as tough, but I'm not bitter. It's the path I needed to take.
Yeah. So that was one of my next questions. I was going to ask, how did you know that you were strong in these areas and could go into engineering? Was it strictly just looking at your own grades and saying, "Okay, I'm good at math and science"? Is that what happened?
I was a very bright student. Only because that was my escape. I think I grew up. There was a lot of poverty. There was a lot of police violence where I grew up. So for me, reading and doing my homework and being in school and achieving success was my ticket out. So that's where I approach this from. Then when I was in high school, I applied and I got into a program where I was able to go to Germany, and I was there for 2 weeks, and I stayed with a family that hosted me. And the family, one of the members of the family was a mechanical engineer in a car company in Germany. And that was my first introduction to an actual person that was a professional engineer. And he took me around his office, and he showed me, what engineers do every single day. And it clicked. I said, oh, so, you do math and you do science, but there's a lot of project management and there's presentations and there's report writing. And I just thought that I could combine all of the things that I was good at into this discipline. And I went for it. It was just like, okay, so this looks like a great career for me. I think I was very career oriented, goal oriented at the time. And I needed to pick a discipline. I mean, it was like doctor, lawyer, engineer, because that was all that I knew at the time. And I mean, I'm glad it worked out, and I'm really happy with where like life took me. But it was absolutely a gamble. I don't know how my brain connected all those dots and made it work, but I did.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, did you start to go into a transportation track when you were in school for civil engineering, or did that happen when you got out?
Definitely when I got out. When I was in college, I had an internship, and I was doing high-rise residential, which was absolutely glamorous. I loved every part of it. I was in a high-rise building in New York City, overlooking Central Park. We were installing marble and beautiful furnishings in these lavish penthouse apartments. And I thought that that's what I wanted to do. I said, okay, I found my niche. I love this. I want to come to work every single day in a half-built penthouse overlooking Central Park. And I thought that that's what I was going to do forever. But unfortunately, I graduated in 2008 from college, which the economy took a very,
Bad
very
timing. Yeah.
sharp downturn on October 2008. So I had to make quick decisions. I was out of college. My family is still low income. They really couldn't support me as an adult out of college, and I had to make a living. There was no way out. So I started applying for jobs, and the one job that was still up and running at that time in engineering was transportation, especially in New York City. It's always rail and trains. We need that running every single day, no matter how the economy is doing. And I was lucky to get a job in that, but it was brand new to me, and I'm still in it. And so I guess it worked out for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, talk to us about how did you find your first internship, and then in this down economic time, how did you find that first job?
Well, when I was in college, things were not too bad. I definitely did apply to every single company. I remember Googling like engineering firms in New York City and construction management firms in New York City, because at the time I think I was leaning more towards construction management, and just applying to all these big firms. It was like Tishman and Bovis Lease, and I went for it, and I went to a million interviews. And I think out of all those interviews that I went to when I was a sophomore, junior, I got two. And I ended up choosing Bovis Lease, even though it paid less than another internship, because I thought it was more glamorous. And I really did. I was a teenager. And I just said, oh, this is a really well-known company. This company it's big and it's world-renowned. And in my mind, I was going to stay with them after I graduated, and I was going to have opportunities to work overseas and to work in very big projects. I didn't project 2008 at that time, but that's why I chose it. Graduating was a little bit more difficult. I was very worried. I had several job offers that eventually were dropped because the economy just took a downturn, and I was told, I'm sorry, we wanted to hire you, but it just looks like things are not going to pan out for us.
Oh,
they were
wow.
worried that, they were not going to have enough projects to keep me busy, which is fair. So there were definitely a lot of crying and panicking. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't. And then I just got lucky. I had a job. I had 2 job offers, and I took the one that I'm in right now, and I'm still there.
Wow, that's great. So how many years has it been now?
It's going to be 8 years in August.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What was your first experience doing construction management? Where were you first exposed to that?
My first exposure was at Bovis Lee's, and I showed up to 15 Center Park West, which if you don't even know the address, it's right next to like the Trump Towers and Columbus Circle in New York City. So it's a very fancy address, and I showed up, and I didn't have the proper footwear. I didn't have the proper anything. I didn't have the proper clothing because I thought I was going for an interview style first day of work. It was kind of embarrassing now that I look back on it, going to a construction site. But this is one of the things that now, as a woman who is always on site, I talk about all the time. I said, it's not really easy for women in engineering to go from a desk job. So, and I have a desk job. I'm a project manager. To go from that to, oh, you're needed on site. And I'm wearing like a pencil skirt and 4-inch heels. So, it's really awkward, and I had to learn to navigate that later on, but it took some time. At that time, I just showed up, and they sent me back home. They're like, well, we'll give you a safety training, which was literally everything that was wrong with what I was wearing. It was like, well, those are the wrong shoes. Pull your hair back, because I have very long hair. You should not wear, a shirt like that. You're going to get caught in some machinery, and no skirts, definitely no skirts. It was things like that. And it was embarrassing because I showed up with 2 other interns that were guys. And there was one more intern. She was female too, and she had less problems than I did. She was a little smarter. But I left that job site. I went and I bought some steel-toed boots and, I don't know, some polo shirts. And I came back, and I was ready. I was ready to work. But it was not awesome. The best way. Not the best way to start a job, I will say that. But lesson learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so talk to us about the transportation field specifically. So for our listeners who may not be familiar with what a transportation engineer does, what are the projects that come in, and what does the entire process look like from, concept to design to the actual construction?
I can't speak for all transportation projects because there really are a lot of different kinds. And it also depends in what state you're working on. I work in New York City, where most of our transportation is just mass transit and ferries, to be honest. We actually are an island. So that's where my expertise is. Some people that are working in, say, Texas or the South have more experience with like highway design, which is completely different, which I don't have experience in. But in mass transit, a lot of the concept begins, it's not a brand new train station. You're dealing with things that are in existence, that are sometimes historical, a lot of times historical. And one of my projects, for example, is the Hoboken Ferry Terminal. Well, it's a train terminal as well. But the whole town, it's historical. The terminal is historical. The trains are. So when you get a project there, as a young engineer, you're like, what am I doing here? Everything is built already. And then you realize that over 100 years, things need a lot of upgrade and things change, and you have to adapt something that is already existing to modern times. And that's a huge challenge. But every single one of my projects that I've worked on as an engineer in New York City and a project manager have been already existing buildings, already existing equipment, tracks, layouts. So it's actually quite challenging because you have to get inventive, and sometimes when things are historical, you're not allowed to just demolish and start over. So you have to respect architecture that's been there for 100 years, and then think about how are you going to make this work for people in 2016. And it's a challenge, and I actually really, really love it because I get to work with a lot of architects, a lot of conservators, a lot of historians, and it's actually quite beautiful places that I get to step in. But because of the nature of that, it's not just go ahead. There's a lot of meetings along the way. So most of the projects are what they call design, bid, build. So in early design, like up to 10% design, it's more like a conceptual. We provide drawings and specifications, but they're very, very broad base. It's just to talk about, so this is what our idea, this is what are we thinking for the space. When you have a historical terminal or a train station, you have to show that to the historical society, and they have to approve that. They have to be okay with everything that you're doing. So it's a lot more steps involved until you go to your 100% design. Once your design is done and everyone has approved it and it's good to go, then you put it to build. Well, the client will put it out to bid, and a construction company will get selected based on that process, depending on the type of agency. How they select it is different. There's low bids, and then there's just most often is who can do the better job for the right money. Yeah. We're not involved. I don't get to select who gets to build the project that we design, but we are involved in the process. And then after that, it's construction phase. And during construction, we're also heavily involved, even as engineers and project managers. Even if we're not the construction managers, we're still involved because it's our design. So we are there every step of the way to answer any questions, to make sure that the design is going according to what we specified. So it's a never-ending process. If it's a large project, it could be years. If it's a small project, it could be 1 year. And they're all important and they all matter. And I really love the process. And when it's over, I'm kind of sad almost because you're hoping that you're going to get another project that's as interesting. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you do. Sometimes it's a lull.
So for these projects that you do the oversight on, your company, do they have to sign off on the drawings? Is that what the oversight does? Like, you watch it being built and make sure it's to the specs and everything, and then the PEs, the professional engineers that are involved, they sign off on it. Is that right?
We sign off on it, or the professional engineers in our firm sign off on our design at 100%. Once we approve of that design and it's done, it's out. During the construction phase, there are more approvals that need to happen that we need to review and sign off on. But a lot of times what we ask is for the construction manager to provide shop drawings, and those need to be signed and sealed by another engineer, another firm that usually the construction manager hires. Mm-hmm. And the reason why we ask for shop drawings is because sometimes those things are they're very detailed. So it's either a specialty that maybe we don't work in. So we just our drawings show a basic layout and we need to know a specific layout. But more often than not is that, especially when we're dealing with existing buildings and structures, we don't know what's behind the walls. We're not quite sure. We can deduce from historical drawings or existing drawings. We just need to have somebody, once they open up the walls and we have to look, then they give us shop drawings to show us like 100% accurate what is there, what's going to get built. But, sometimes we design a run of piping or electrical on assumptions based on historical drawings, and things change over time. Sometimes, companies, they install new equipment and nobody ever updated the drawings, and it happens often. So yeah, so that's why we ask for shop drawings during construction.
What's one of your favorite projects that you've worked on or that you're working on now that maybe had an interesting historical aspect to it?
My favorite project, I'm not technically working on it now, but I'm in the same site, is the Hoboken Ferry Terminal. It was in like historical terminal. Ferries used to come. It was for horses and people, and a whole other era that I can't even imagine, like taking a ferry across New York to New Jersey with my horses and luggage. But it's what it was built for. So you can imagine how it was just not equipped for people today. So around the 70s, it had been abandoned. And in the early 2000s, my company was awarded the job to redesign it because there was a desperate need for a ferry across the Hudson River. So this project was massive. It was 3 phases. I came in at the later stages, and I still had a lot of work to do. But if I can show you pictures of what this terminal looked like, it was run down. The piers had collapsed into the water. The copper facade was deteriorating. It was all falling. It was a nightmare to even take a look at it. And we rebuilt the entire thing in conjunction with the Historical Society to make sure that when people walk into this terminal, they can say, wow, this is brand new and beautiful, but also there's like a nod to the past. We fished out all of these old signage and equipment and copper from the river that had fallen into the river from deterioration. And, we categorized it and stored it for a museum possibly in the future. So it was a lot of delicate work that had to be done. But everything from the paint to, the copper was artistic. It had to go with everything that was there. We were looking at photos from the late 1800s to see, hey, what does this look like when it was actually in its heyday? And I thought that was a really, really wonderful, beautiful process because it made us as engineers take a step back and imagine what that place was like and then reimagine it for the future. And it turned out beautiful, and it's in use now. And after we designed it, after it opened, we had 2 hurricanes that went through that. First, we had Hurricane Irene, and then most recently, Hurricane Sandy. They both did a little bit of damage, and because of that damage, we keep coming back to the terminal. It's our project. It's our baby to fix any repairs, anything. We know it. I know that terminal inside and out. And to this day, everybody has a question about Hoboken. They just come to me. They're like, oh, do you know? I mean, it's not a joke. People literally are like, do you know what paint color it is? And I'm like, oh, absolutely. I know that paint color. And I can I can name the color that it is because, I worked in it so much, and we painstakingly literally pick colors and et cetera. So it's a really beautiful, beautiful place to be in. And I feel very proud when I'm walking through it.
That's awesome. Now, I haven't seen pictures of this yet, so I don't know what it's like, but by what you're describing, it sounds like multiple different professions would have needed to been involved with the design of this. I mean, for this project, were there structural and coastal engineers involved since it was by water?
Yeah. One of our specialties that I will say that we don't do, not my company, but it's marine engineering. So we hired marine engineers because we needed to rebuild bulkheads and piers and all this. And I learned more than I will ever need to know about marine engineering. And it's interesting to me because now I talk about it like I know what I'm saying. But at the time, I didn't know what a barge was. Like I really didn't know what a barge was. And I'm like, what's a barge? Which just sounds kind of silly, but I really didn't. And but we were dealing with even permitting to do coastal work, was brand new to me. And, we're dealing with also very constricted timelines of like when you can do work in the coast because, I don't know, fish were spawning in this season. And I'm like, I thought it was a joke. And they're like, no, we really can't do any work from, I don't know, May till August, etc.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's like a very long period where you're not allowed to do coastal work in New York, which I had no idea. But those things, they affect your schedule, they affect your budget, they affect a lot. So it took a lot of working out to figure out when was the best time to bid the project so that we can start the project at a good time so we miss, the spawning season and bad weather, etc.
Okay, I have a question for you. So kind of along that note, is there something that you feel like school should have covered or prepared you for that you ended up learning in the field?
Life-wise or
no, specific to the profession. So something specific to engineering or project management or execution of a project, anything along those lines.
Right. Well, I think I was probably ahead of the game because I took so many construction management courses, but not a lot of my friends and a lot of that are also in engineering, they were at a disadvantage when it came to dealing with other people. I think that working with a team and realizing that your job as engineers is so much more than just design and looking at codes. So when you go to a meeting and you're not prepared to present, to talk out loud, to sell your product, most of that. Because you feel like when you're in engineering school, like most of the work you're going to do is going to be calculations and drawings on a computer. So you think that you're going to be very isolated at a desk, just like crunching out numbers. And the reality of engineering is that most of your time you're going to be in meetings with other people that are completely different from you, people that have different ideas, and you're going to have to collaborate and you're going to have to take their ideas and make it work with what you have. And that was a little bit more shocking than I thought it would be, because I know we talk a lot about teamwork. It's not quite the same to do teamwork with like your classmates than it is to do teamwork with your superiors and with your clients together. And you have to be there, and they put you on the spot and they're asking you, so what are your ideas for this, and you have to kind of think on your feet, which is not something that you do when you're in college and you're with your friends in your dorm room and you're brainstorming together while eating pizza. So I would say that we needed more of those. We needed more presentations. We needed more opportunities to write and to speak as engineers, because those skills are valuable no matter what discipline you're in.
Absolutely. I agree with that. So what was it specifically that made you feel like you had a leg up above your peers in this way, like in this communications realm?
Well, I'm chatty by birth. So there's that. But I realized that when I'm with other of my coworkers who are, just strictly engineers and they only feel comfortable with engineering, that when we're in meetings and say the client asks them a question, sometimes I feel like I have to jump in, like I have to be the one that does the talking, or the introducing, or the welcome everybody, can everybody introduce themselves? And a lot of this falls onto me, not just to me, of course, there's other project managers. I'm talking strictly in comparison to engineers, because they're a little awkward. They're a little like, I'm just here to take my notes and leave. Sometimes they only want to hear about their own discipline. So if they're a plumbing engineer, they sit in a meeting and they're like, all right, well, is that all that you have for that? Okay, then I'm done. I'm out of here. And I'm just like, well, you know what? There's so much more that you can learn by just listening to people and having conversations. And I don't quite know if it's just my personality that I like to talk to people and I like to learn from other people, or if it's an engineering problem, but I suspect it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, that's great. So outside of the writing and speaking kind of realm, are there any strengths or skills that you think are important to be successful in transportation engineering?
Hmm. Skills. Let's see. Well, I don't want to make it sound like you have to be a special person to work in transportation, but you do have to be a person that thinks about people. You have to think about what do people more than myself need. You have to think about people with disabilities, people with children, people who are elderly. You might not be any of those things, but you do have to think about how other people use spaces. I'm a woman and I'm Latina. So a lot of times when I'm thinking about a new space and how are we designing it or redesigning it, I think about it as a woman. I said, what would I like? What would make me feel safe walking down this terminal? Is it lighting? Is it a telephones that I can call for help? Is it security guards? And that to me matters. And I bring that to the table. And I think that a lot of times people forget that they're not the only ones using a space. They think, well, whatever. And I think we have an idea that, or a belief that the average person that uses a space is like a white man in, like, I don't know, who's 30 years old. And in reality is that when you design what's for such a narrow person, then you miss out on a lot of opportunities to make something really, really amazing.
Yeah, and it sounds like this aspect of it brings you that fulfillment part where you know that you're helping the community.
Absolutely. I mean, I force myself, and I think a lot of it with me has to do with, I consider myself an activist. I didn't before, and it's very recent that I've kind of been comfortable with just calling myself an activist. But I do, and even though I travel and I talk in a lot of schools about being a woman in engineering, a lot of it is just in general, just being a woman in this society. It's so much more than just a woman in engineering. And the fact that engineering is still so male dominated, it definitely affects the product. I absolutely believe that if there were more people of color, if there were more women in this discipline, then we have much, much better products, so much more innovation. Not just because we're women or people of color, but because we just bring this entirely new perspective on things. And that perspective is really important and it matters.
That was really well articulated. So you segued for me that your own there. That was helpful. So
You're welcome. You're welcome. I try my best.
Yeah. Okay. So getting into your activism work, you've done a lot of writing and a lot of speaking, and you've been interviewed in several other places on these different topics on being a woman in engineering, being a Latina in engineering. Okay, can you talk to us about that? Let's start with school. Tell us where you went to school, and were there many women in your program? Do you know the rough percentage? And were there many Latinas in your program?
Well, I went to college at Columbia University School of Engineering and Applied Science. And well, I don't want to say that there were not a lot of women, because I really do believe that there were, as I recall it. I don't know specific numbers, but I do think it had to do with the major that I was in. There were absolutely a lot more women in civil engineering than there were in mechanical engineering, say, or electrical engineering for sure, where I had friends there, and sometimes there were one of two or three women in the entire department. So I was in I had a leg up. I had a department that was, say almost 50% women. And now after we graduated, things changed a little bit, because I don't believe that just because we have gender equity in universities or colleges that translates to the working environment, because I do think that a lot of us drop out right after college, and then a lot of us drop off later on after that, especially through mid-career. So that's where I am now. I would say my mid-career. Is that what I don't even know what mid-career is. I always told, I know, I'm like segue. I'm like, my mid-career. I'm like, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Oh no.
I'm tired. What was I talking about?
Okay,
so college. All
yeah.
right, yeah. I don't remember the next part of your question, Mel. I'm sorry.
No, so I just kind of wanted to start with, in college, how you felt in that atmosphere, and then just go on into the workplace atmosphere. What has it been like for you as a woman and Latina in engineering and on construction sites?
Right. So like I said, in college, I think that there were definitely a lot of women, not a lot of Latina, I would say. I don't even remember one other Latina. I remember some Latino men, but not women. So that was always lacking for me, and I always had the understanding that there was just not a lot of like Latinas in engineering. At the time, it didn't bother me because I just thought that that was the way things were, and that it was going to change, but it was going to be fine. It didn't really hit me until I started working as a professional that I really wanted a mentor, and I really wanted to find people that understood where I came from, and I didn't. So I had a lot of coworkers, but none of them really understood my background. I mean, I didn't really talk too much about it because I already felt a little bit out of place. As soon as I started working, it was clear that there were not many female engineers. I was the only woman in my department when I started working there.
How big was the department?
My department was not too big. So we had about, at that time, I would say about 15 people, but I was like the youngest and I was the only female. So I was intimidated for many, many reasons.
Yeah.
And the only woman, and the only person of color too. So there was, I felt like I was like, I had a wall at each side, and I was doing my best. I was happy. I loved it. Yeah,
Do you mean you were working with all white guys?
absolutely. I
Oh
really
man.
was.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
So
my guys, older than I was by far, by a big shot. Except for like one guy that was like an older brother, I would say.
yeah. So has there been a specific instance where someone has been disrespectful or unkind, where you've had to confront this kind of being the minority?
Disrespected in the workplace, but to be sincere, a lot of time, I mean, not all times it comes from people that do not work with me closely. So I think that the idea of like who, to seeing a woman in an engineering department that is mostly male, to outsiders, to administrative assistants, to delivery guys, to accountants, etc., it feels like, oh, you must be the secretary. You must be here to make appointments, and you must be here to answer our questions. So that's where I find a lot of the disrespect comes from. But my coworkers are very supportive. They've been there with me. And even if I think that sometimes they don't quite understand how I feel, I don't talk to them about being a woman in the workplace or being Latina in the workplace, just because I don't really know what to say to them about it. But for the most part, I'm their coworker and I'm part of their team. And I think they treat me very much like an equal. And I really appreciate that. So when I complain or when I talk about sexism in engineering or just in general in STEM, I draw upon, my own experiences. But I always say it's not a personal thing. It's not that that your coworkers are looking at you and demeaning you because you're a woman. A lot of times it's this society and the way that you feel in a place where you think that you don't belong. So sometimes I just don't feel like I belong. And it's absolutely no one's fault because they don't know that I feel that way. And, maybe when I was younger, it bothered me. Now that I'm older and I think I understand the way that, male dominated fields work and how just in general, by the fact that they're male dominated, you feel excluded. I realize that it's not personal. I realize that the work that I have to do as an activist is to infiltrate these spaces with more women, with more people of color, so that naturally there will just be more of a balance, and this feeling of not belonging will hopefully correct itself.
What do you think are the best ways to get more women and Latina women to go into fields like engineering?
I think that what keeps us away It's not the discipline. It's not the fact that it's engineering. It could be a little bit that, and I think that especially with younger girls, I think they start early on to think that they're just not good at math, etc. So those are things that are honestly to me easier to work with because they're when they're younger kids and you're molding them, and there's so many programs out there for young children to realize that STEM is really fun and that they can be really, really good at it. But as adults, a lot of it is just workplace issues. They're not just relating to STEM, they're to all workplaces in the US. Their parental leave, it's the pay gap, it's the work environment, flexible time, all of the things that make it really difficult, I think, for women who are still a lot of the times carrying a lot of the burdens of childcare, of housekeeping, of work, and sometimes being the breadwinners in their families. It's a lot to deal with, and I think that we need to, as a society, change the way that we think about the workplace and people in the workplace, because in my opinion, and maybe that's just relating to engineering because it's where I have most of my experience, the workplace is still very much an old-fashioned 9 to 5. The breadwinner is the man with a wife at home who takes care of the kids kind of situation where that's not the way that many of us are nowadays. I think a lot of times, not just relating to childcare, but just life in general, we do so much more. I myself, I write on the side, I speak on the side, I do so many things, and I find it really hard to fit my lifestyle. And I don't have children and I'm not married into this 9 to 5 really strict environment. So if I ever consider moving away from engineering, it would just be that it's so stifling to work in this environment like that.
You're listening to the STEMxm podcast with Mel, the engineer. And the guest speaker on this episode is Patty Valoy.
What motivates you to do those things, all of this extra writing and speaking, and which aspect of that is most important to you? Is there a particular organization that you're really passionate about that you do a lot of work with or something like that?
I don't work with a specific organization, but I have considered quitting many times because it is a lot and it's very taxing on me, personally, on my body, on my mind. It's a lot of travel. It's a lot of preparing. So especially the winter months are really tough for me because that's where most schools want me to come speak. It's a busy time for them as well. And every time I come back from an event, I'm like, oh my God, that was so tiring and I'm exhausted and I have to get off a plane and go straight to the office. It's a lot. And I tell myself this is going to be the last one. I'm done. And then I get an email from somebody that heard me speak, and it's a lot of times it's a young woman, and she's telling me how she was feeling so down and she's so happy that she met somebody that looks like her, that's in this discipline that she wants to enter. And I just feel like, okay, like if I quit on her. So I have this there's always somebody kind of pushing me along and telling me like, listen, like you're needed and your story matters. And it's why I keep doing it. I think I moved on from the I want to quit phase, only because I really, really do care. But when I'm really, really tired and I've traveled every week for, the past 2, 3 months, sometimes I get there. I really absolutely get there. And I have to remember to do a lot of self-care. I have to tell myself that, yes, there are people out there who need me and who need my story. And I might not be able to change their lives, but if at that moment I made them feel a little bit better about their situation, then it mattered. But in the same breath that I matter as well, and that I can't save everybody. I can't save the industry. I'm not going to be able to do that. And that it's okay to sometimes say, I really can't come and talk at your school. I need to be with my family. I need to relax. I need to take a vacation. And I've made peace with that it's okay. Like, and I think that you're going to feel the same way. I know that you're just starting doing this recently. That's what you told me earlier. So I think you'll probably get to a point where you feel like this is a lot of unpaid labor. And yeah, you will, and it is. And, you're going to feel like, man, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Does it even matter? And my answer to you is, even though I don't know where you're taking this, that it really does. Even if like it's the one person that heard something that you said and it was meaningful and it made them kind of keep going for a little longer, like you changed that person's life at that moment. And that's huge. And, people like you change my life every day as well. When you email me, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's doing a whole, like blog about this and a podcast about this. I feel like I'm not the only one doing work, and that makes me feel great. Like I absolutely love what you do.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping that one day that, I'll get those kind of emails where, it's validation that the podcast and the stories of these women and women like you encourage some girls or boys, to go into a field that they're interested in, even if they don't have someone right in their life to guide them.
You will. I guarantee it. It will, because there's such a need for women in engineering to be vocal about their day-to-day experiences. I think that, there are a lot of published studies out there. I mean, I've read probably every single one of them. I do research every time. I read every one of them that comes out so that I can extrapolate data and information and, put it in a PowerPoint and present it at schools. But when you take that and you read those studies, you feel a little bit disconnected. And I think that an engineering student or a young woman in engineering reading them, she might feel a little deflated. She might feel like, oh my God, the study says that, 90% of, women are dissatisfied with their workplace environment. Like that's terrible to read. And then you start wondering, like, how much longer can I take this?
Right.
But when you hear stories like me talking and you talking about, your journey through your career and your life, you put a real face to that. And I think that people gravitate to that, and people need it. And it doesn't have to be a happy story. It doesn't have to be like, oh, and I did it and now I live happily ever after. Just hearing somebody say like, yeah, I struggled, and sometimes it's really hard, and sometimes I really love it. And like, that's all that they really need.
When you go and do these talks, what do you think it is that women resonate with the most?
Well, personally for me, and I mean, I'm not even trying to like toot my own horn because it's almost embarrassing, but I think I keep it very real. I think I don't pretend to be somebody that I'm not. When I'm not sure of the answer, I'm very honest about that. I think a lot of people want me to pull out like data from my head. And I said, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea what percentage of X, Y, and Z does, ABC. But I think I also bring this like down to earth thing to engineering, where I think when you're in college and you're imagining what you're going to be in a professional environment, you think you're going to be working with people that are, high career, very intimidating, that know everything. And then I go there and I said, no, I don't know everything. And sometimes I mess up, and I'm just like you. And it's okay to be yourself. And, I don't try to hide who I am. I have my Brooklyn accent, and I've tried to get rid of it. It's not going to happen. I have like my hair is like purple and blue and that's perfectly okay. I have a nose ring. I like wearing heels, and I like mixing prints. And when I show up and I look like that, people are like, wait, you're the speaker that we hired to come talk to our students? I'm like, yeah, this is her. But that's who I am. And I think, a lot of times it's like the faculty members. But I finished my presentation, and then they realized that not one of those students stood up, because all those students thought like, wow, look at this girl. She has blue hair and she's talking about being an engineer for all this time, and they connect to it. So, they can't hate me for too long for it.
Yeah, not at all. That's great. Have you had any people that have influenced you or helped you out along the way?
For a long time, my answer to that was no, I haven't found anyone, because I was thinking about mentors as somebody that had to be in your specific discipline, doing the work you do, who was guiding your hand in a professional manner. Looking back on it, though, I said, yeah, I had a lot of mentors. And sometimes they just didn't look like what I thought was a mentor. Some of them were activist friends that were, working on their own activism. I have a friend who talks about eating disorders, and I have another friend who talks about mental health, and another friend who talks about, women in the media. And we got together and we were always talking, and they always gave me the space to talk about what I was feeling, and to express myself openly, without judgment. And I just thought it was like, oh, it's just my girlfriends and we're just talking. And later on, I realized, I said, those are my mentors. They're doing the same. They're going through the same things that I'm going through, maybe in a different place, but we're still there and they're still listening to me. And they really helped me, I think, find my own voice. They really helped me realize that who I am as an individual is so much more important than who I think I have to be as an engineer. Because when I go to my workplace and most of my coworkers are white men, it's hard to think of yourself in that space. It's hard to envision what you're going to be, who you're going to be in this firm. Who am I going to mimic in this environment where nobody looks like me? So I would say that I did have a lot of activist friends that mentored me, personally. Professionally, so many more. Even if I didn't think so, because I thought I needed like a Latina woman to guide my hands, and I never found that. I still don't work with any Latina engineers that's going to guide the way for me. So I had to learn to take lessons where I found them from my coworkers, even if they didn't meant it as lessons. So, I just got to learn from people. I told myself I have to learn from people, because they're also not looking at me and thinking like this is a girl that I want to, make sure that she gets ahead so she can replace me one day, because, none of us see each other in each other's place. And, that's kind of how life works.
Now that you've been in the industry, though, for 8 years now, you said?
Yes.
Okay, so you've been working in transportation engineering for 8 years now. Where do you see your career going? Where will it head for you ideally?
Oh, that's such a hard question. It's a really hard question because I don't know that I have the answers to it right this moment. Maybe in a year, maybe in two, maybe tomorrow. Right now, I'm happy where I am. And when I think about the future, I do see myself being an activist. So I don't think I'll ever not be an activist. And I tell people I'm always going to be a woman in STEM, whether I leave engineering, or not. I think I'll always be a woman in STEM. I do hope in the future I can start my own organization. It's scary to think about it. I don't even know where to start, to be honest with you, but I do in the future want to build something, not like leave a legacy behind type thing, but more so that I can bring on other people that are doing similar work, and I can kind of take that burden off of myself alone and build a community. If I build an organization, that's a community of people like me going through the same issues that can help other people. And, the more that kind of come along and join this bandwagon, the better it has to be.
Right. That's great. So we're pretty much to the end of the questions that I've got for you. So I'd just like to open it up to any thoughts that you want to share to a young community of women that are interested in potentially going into engineering, any Latina women out there who are looking at going into a STEM career. What is your message to them?
Well, I don't know that I have all the answers. So for me to, give lessons, it's a little hard for me to do that, because I find that the best lesson that I can give to somebody is just to listen to themselves, to listen to what they like, not to look at engineering as like well, this is what this person's doing, and this is what this career looks like, so I have to become that. Just be really comfortable in who you are, whatever it is that you are, whatever it is that you like, because engineering historically, I mean, it was just a bunch of white guys sitting around a table. And if that, women didn't push through those barriers and be like, we're going to come into the space and we're going to rock it, whether you like it or not, it would have never changed. And I think that, we're in this new space where, we have some very well established women in engineering, not nearly enough, but there's some. So we have to push the envelope, I think, even more. We have to think about, the next generation. And like kids these days, my God, they're so comfortable in like who they are. And I absolutely love that. And I hope that they don't change themselves to be this career person that they think they have to be. I hope that they bring, their talents and their creativity and their sense of self to all disciplines in STEM and beyond.
Very well said. Patty, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to speak with you. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thank you so much, Mel. I had a blast. I really enjoyed talking to you.
And that was Patricia Valoy. I hope you enjoyed listening to that chat as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. Patricia's got just a fantastic attitude and outlook on everything. She is on Twitter, so if you have questions for her about transportation engineering or other advocacy work that she does, you can send her a tweet. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes, and I'm also going to put links to these articles that she's been featured in, including the one that I mentioned at the very beginning of the episode. So you can find today's show notes at STEMxm.com/episode 10. That's STEMxm.com/episode and then the number 10. As always, if you'd like to help the show out, you can go to STEMxm.com/partner. Sharing with your friends or students you're connected to helps the show get more exposure, and this is what makes us successful. Really quick before we go, another thing you can do to help us out is go on to iTunes and rate the podcast. So we do appreciate your positive feedback and constructive criticism. I'm going to read one of those ratings or reviews that we got today on iTunes. I can't tell you the username because it looks like some little faces. So they're cute little faces, and whoever this is gave us 5 stars, and they wrote, "Each podcast creates a roadmap for young women considering a career in STEM. I love Mel's mission and believe she's providing a much-needed service to the STEM fields. Keep up the good work." So whoever you are out there, thank you so much for your iTunes rating, and I'll be looking for more feedback like this from you all coming up in the future. Okay, guys, I will see you in episode 11.
This has been an episode of the STEMxm podcast. Thank you for listening. We would really love if you could pop over to iTunes and give us an honest, positive rating. It helps more listeners find us to learn about STEM careers. Thanks again, cheers, and we'll catch you on the next episode.